Buddy, put that thing back in its holster. We haven't gone anywhere.
I don't understand.
Check out the MichaelDukesShow.com for information on how to get access to the podcast.
Welcome to the party, pal.
The Michael Dukes Show.
The greed and the entitlement is astounding to me.
What more could you want from a low-budget radio program?
This is a dumpster fire.
That was just BS.
It is time to get a new perspective.
We know just what you need, and we've got just the cure. Open wide and prepare for a steaming hot cup of freedom.
I just don't fathom it.
The Michael Dukes Show, streaming live across the world.
Yep, live around the world on the internet at michaeldukeshow.com and across the state of Alaska on this favorite radio station and or FM translator. Hello, my friends. Hello. I just called to let you know. I see you for... Oh, man, Neil Diamond. How did that get in there? That is weird. All right, welcome to the program. Tuesday morning. And a little cooler, little cloudier. It's okay. It's okay. Man, so gorgeous the last few days. I was a little under the weather yesterday, although you may not have known it at the show. Feeling a lot better today. 100%. Ready to go. Let's get cracking on this and get things going on Tuesday. That means the weekly top three is on deck. And we're going to be talking with Brad Keithley from Alaskans for Sustainable Budgets. It'll be our weekly... we got our therapy session with Chris Story at the end of the show. It's our kind of our weekly, uplift session and soothing and life coaching and positivity thing. And I don't want to say Brad is the opposite of that. It's not really. It's more educational. It's just not quite as positive. It's, it's good. It's good. It's what you need. It's like that debridement that you do when you get a wound and you got to cut some stuff away to get to the good stuff. It's painful, but boy, did we need that to make sure everything is good. Brad Keithley, Alaskans for Sustainable Budgets, joins us this morning. I'm trying to paint a positive picture here, Brad. Sometimes it's hard. Sometimes it's hard with that.
That was positive. Yeah, so it's positive in the sense that it wasn't as negative as it could have been.
No, we joke about this, but I mean, there are some hard truths here. I mean, you dive into things sometimes that people may not be looking at or may not be seeing. And I know some of the folks in the chat room, and sometimes I get an email about, oof, man, it's kind of a downer. But if we don't face the hard questions, if we don't face the hard issues, we're going to get run over by it, right? I mean, we've got to face it. And that's what you're all about. You don't do it intentionally. I'm not saying, you're a sadist or anything, but we're a little, sometimes we feel like we're a little masochistic coming back to the well, so to speak, every week, but it's all good.
I'm going to put a sign across the back that says Truth Tuesdays. Truth
Tuesdays. See, there you go. Truth Tuesdays. And the truth. You can't handle the truth.
There we go. That's what I want my bumper to be.
That's right. Yeah. You can't handle the truth. All right. Well, we're going to dive into the weekly top three. And I'll be honest with you, Brad, on the first one, I don't really know exactly what was said because you want to talk about the hallucinations of the Newsminer. And I refuse to give them money. Okay. I just will not pay for a Newsminer subscription. They won't let you read a single article without having to pay their $100 a year fee or whatever. And I'm just not giving them any money. There's not enough coming out of the Fairbanks Daily Newsminer for me to justify $100 a year for their subscription or whatever. But you've got the dope here on the Newsminer and their hallucinations. Which has something to do with the need for an in-state gas line. Oh, we need a Wally Hickle. That's what's going on. I could read the headline. That's all I could read. We need a Wally Hickle. So take it away, my friend.
Well, I think the Newsminer may have proven yet again why it had to move to nonprofit status, because I don't think it understands. I don't think it understands profits. It may not understand well, I don't think it understands the bottom line of
Basic economics. I mean,
Yeah.
basic economics.
So the headline, this is an op-ed. This isn't an article. This isn't somebody else. This is an article about something somebody else said. It's a headline in the op-ed section written by the Newsminer itself, the Newsminer editorial staff, which may be one person anymore, that says an in-state gas line in need of a Wally Hickle. And the opening paragraph is, it's a prospect that is too good not to consider. Maybe, just maybe, Alaska could finally see an in-state gas line from the North Slope, an energy source that could help lower the costs. Good Lord. Lower costs for rail belt communities in the seemingly never-ending quest for affordable heat and power. And it goes on, it lifts off from this recent announcement between AGDC, the Alaska Gas Line Development Corporation, and Great Bear Pantheon Resources, which is a wannabe producer up on the North Slope, about the recent contract that they entered into where Great Bear promised more gas than it has, to supply a pipeline that hasn't been built by AGDC, to transport the yet non-existent gas down to through the yet non-existent AGDC pipeline down to the Cook Inlet. And it would solve, in the Newsminer's opinion, it'd be the solution for everything. It would solve Fairbanks's problem. It would solve South Central's Cook Inlet problem. It would just solve everything. And all it needs is according to the Newsminer, is a visionary in the mode of Wally Hickle to kickstart it and keep kicking it down the road. Now, Wally Hickle had a pipeline at one time, the Yukon Pacific gas line that he was going to build from the North Slope down to Valdez. Was one of the visions that Wally had. He formed a corporation for it. He entered into partnerships for it. He had a whole series of permits that he pursued. He was going to export the gas out of Valdez into the Far East. He was going to turn it into LNG and export it into the Far East. Never got off the ground. So maybe unintentionally, what the Newsminer is asking for is a visionary that realizes that it doesn't pencil out, even remotely pencil out, and kills it. Sort of like ultimately happened to Wally's pipeline. Wally wasn't the one that killed it. The market was. Nobody would finance it. But maybe the Newsminer unintentionally is suggesting that this go down the same road. What the contract between Pantheon and AGDC is it's more than a Hail Mary. I mean, it reminds me a lot. There was a company that owned what is now owned by John Hendricks's Hex, that owned that prospect, the Kitchen Lights prospect, long before John Hendricks, a company called Escapita. And Escapita drilled a well out there and found some gas, and announced in a legislative hearing that they found more gas in that field. They were going to find more gas in that field that had been discovered in the Cook Inlet to date. This was the early 2010s, maybe. And what they did was extrapolate from the gas they found in this one well, and extrapolated it over the entire that one section that they found was gas prone, extrapolated it over the entire Kitchen Lights field, and said, didn't even say if, that this gas zone would be continuous across the entire Kitchen Lights field, would have the same size, and as a result would volumetrically hold this much gas. And there are huge headlines. I mean, not everybody, but the papers bought off on it and had this field day about solved. We've got this new find. Well, that comment understood zero about the Cook Inlet, because the Cook Inlet isn't a continuous zone. The Cook Inlet pinches in and has breaks and has faults and has all sorts of things going on in it that ensure that finding gas in one well in one area will not be continuous throughout the entire field. And it turned into a joke after a while. I mean, it was taken seriously at the time. I remember Mike Chenault, saying it was a great thing. But it continued. It continued seriously for a while, and then it sort of fell apart as people realized what they were actually claiming. It's the same thing here. Pantheon doesn't have the amount of gas that they've dedicated to this. This has all the characteristics of what in the stock market you call a pump and dump. You get a corporation out there who pumps its stock, or some analyst will pump its stock by saying, "Ooh, look at what we found. Ooh, look at what we have.
The next great thing, right? Here's the next great thing.
Here's this widget we've got, and it's gonna take the market by storm." You remember when one of those little handheld carts that you can ride around on your own? You see them downtown in Anchorage, people on tours. Anyway, I remember when those were announced.
The Segways, you mean?
Segways. There we go.
Yeah.
When Segways were first announced, it was going to be, it was going to overtake the market. We didn't need cars anymore. We wouldn't need buses. We wouldn't need trains. Everybody probably wouldn't need planes. Everybody would be able to get around on their own, and it was just a great solution of all time. The stock jumped, and then that's the pump part of it, and then the dump is when the owners of the current owners of the stock, when they see it get to that peak, they dump it. they've maxed out their what they can get from the pump, and then they dump it, and the stock plummets. And what the Pantheon piece of this announcement reminds me a lot of a classic stock pump and dump. It's hey, look at this great announcement that we can put out on Twitter and all over the places, and all these people who want to invest in Pantheon are just jumping at the bit. Oh, we finally got a market for this non-existent gas, and we'll go from here. Anyway, that's what the Newsminer is jumping at here and telling us that we've got the solution. There's the piece of this that says an energy source, a piece of this opening paragraph, an energy source that could help lower costs for rail belt communities. Have they seen what the cost of the pipeline is? What the per unit cost of building a 40-inch pipeline to carry a trickle of gas is?
Again, the economics of this is just, I mean, it's been cited. I've wanted a gas line for years. I fought for it early on, but it became more and more apparent as we went on that the economics of it were just not going to work. You couldn't have a $30 billion pipeline and have the economics of it pay off at the other end in a short enough time period that you could get investors on board. That was always the problem. Yes, maybe in a 30, 40, 50-year turn cycle, you could get your money back, but nobody was willing to loan money on that basis. And by the way, doesn't this remind you of the whole Bill Walker? I went to Japan and I went to China and got the contracts for the gas to deliver the gas there. I mean, it's the same thing. So great. Great Bear said, we're going to promise you more gas than we have. That seems like a pretty safe bet for Great Bear because they never have to deliver on it. This is a great PR move on our part. We know that they're never going to build a pipeline. Promise them as much gas as they want.
Yeah. Well, actually, Walker's was more realistic. I mean, the Chinese actually need gas. The Japanese actually need gas. I guess in a sense we need gas, and that the Cook Inlet's running short, and Fairbanks doesn't have enough. But the economics are just staggeringly against this. And then they talk about Susitna at the end. How we need Wally Hickel to push this through because we never pushed through Susitna, which would have been the great. Well, Susitna didn't pencil out either. There's a reason that people don't build these things, and it's not because there's a great conspiracy out there to deny Alaska these projects. It's because they don't pencil out. It's because you can't find people to finance it. So it's clear that the Newsminer doesn't have a business editor who actually could put a market test to this thing, and it's just another hallucination. And Michael, there's a bad thing that comes of this. It raises people's expectations. It takes their eye off the ball of what they ought to be focusing on. And it's another excuse for delay of things that we ought to be doing now before they get more expensive to do later. And that's headlines like this, op-eds. I mean, this is the newspaper's op-eds. They're supposed to be thought leaders. They're supposed to think through these things. Headlines like this, op-eds like this, just, it's like squirrel, right? Everybody runs off in that direction now. Oh my God, the Newsminer said that we ought to be doing this. All we need is Wally Hickle to push it through. And it's just a waste of time and an unnecessary, worse than unnecessary, a counterproductive diversion.
And again, the irony that Wally Hickle did try to push a gas line and failed, and they said we need another one. Okay, that's is it expectation or is it deliberate distraction? That's the question that's being asked, and that's a deeper one for sure. All right, Brad Keithley, Alaskans for Sustainable Budgets. Number 2 of the weekly top 3 is coming up next. The Michael Duke Show, Common Sense Radio.
Running on 100% pure beard power. Oh, also some coffee. We dip our beard in coffee.
Ha, nice beard.
The Michael Duke Show.
Okay, Brad Keithley, Alaskans for Sustainable Budgets. Brad, we have Nick Begich on yesterday, and every time we have him on, we always talk about how arithmetic and math doesn't lie, and I think to that we need to add the addendum of, economics are a bitch, because this is, this is the truth. I mean, if it was great and it was pie in the sky, we could do whatever we want. Sure, it'd be great to build a gas line and export the 17 trillion cubic feet of gas we got on the North Slope to somewhere. That would be great. But somehow, some way, it's all got to be paid for. There's got to be an economical, and it just has not worked. It's just there's not enough demand for all that stuff to come about. And there was an article in the newspaper talking about the royalties, which we're going to get to, that kind of deals with some of the same things. Like you can't just make this stuff up. You can't just say it's going to be there and focus on that to the exclusion of all else. And that's what I feel like we're doing here. We're just everything we can do to avoid the elephant in the room, which is it's going to be cheaper to import gas, period. And end of story.
Yeah. It's sort of like state finances, right? Nobody wants to be real about state finances. I've talked on the show before. I've written columns on, we've got to be talking about revenues. We've got to talk about, to save the PFD, we've got to be talking about more equitable revenues. Nobody wants to talk about that. So we talk about, transgender sports and stuff. Everybody wants a diversion from the hard stuff. The things that, really take thought and really, require pencil to paper and require real serious people to think about it. You want a diversion from that. And the diversions, diversions are okay in the sense that they give your brain some relief from the constant gnawing of having to worry about this stuff. But the diversions, when serious people who are supposed to be serious, like the Daily Newsminer editorial person, board, whatever, people who are supposed to be serious and give serious guidance to the community, when people like that go off on these frolicking detours and say, oh, all we need is a Wally Hickle to push it through, it's all sitting there, the gas is there, you could build a pipeline, and Pantheon's entered into this contract, it's all right there. Serious people who then spread that diversion, making it seem much more real than it is. They're doing a disservice. I mean, this is just to trigger a few people in the chat room. It's the same disservice that people do when they say now, after we've gone through the 20 teens and the early 2020s, now say, oh, I can solve the state's budget crisis by just cutting spending. No, you can't. We tried that. Didn't work. Blew up in Dunleavy's face. He hasn't tried it again. Couldn't even get 16 from the legislature to support it, to back him up on it. And it's gotten worse from there. It's not happening. But, people walk around saying, I can solve this by, just cutting spending. Well, you can't. and you're diverting you're taking people off on this frolicking detour, thinking they can do something that's not realistic, and taking us away from focusing on the serious matter at hand. It's okay to have, sort of like the comic strip, right? Reading the comic strips is okay. We all need to be doing serious work in our life, but reading the comic strips is okay because it gives us a diversion. But nobody should believe the comic strips. And that's what this op-ed in the Fairbanks Newsminer is. It is a comic strip, masquerading as serious thought. And to the extent people think it is serious, and all we need is a Wally Hickle, boxer. All we need is a Wally Hickle to solve this. You're just wasting our time.
Right. Just need a fighter who'll get up there and do it, who will defy the economics of the situation and get it through by force of will, will build the pipe and mine the ore to build the pipe and do it himself. I mean, that's kind of the epitome of the Alaskan, right, rugged individualist, but there's a smacks right up in the face of reality when you realize that it's billions of dollars. Calvin and Hobbes is reals. Yeah, that's true. It is true. I do believe that. All right, we gotta jump back into it. Brad Keithley, Alaskans for Sustainable Budgets, the weekly top 3. Let's do this thing.
The Michael Duke Show, proudly splitting the left versus right dichotomy. Yeah, I had to look that word up too. I don't think it means what he thinks it means. Here he is, though. That guy, Michael Dukes. The one with the show.
That word actually does mean what I think it means. I just, gosh. All right, welcome back. The weekly top 3 continues. Brad Keithley, Alaskans for Sustainable Budgets. Brad has a lot of things that he wants to hear from folks, but we're going to focus in on the congressional candidates. There's some things that he wants to hear, and there's reasons for that because math don't lie. Let me just put it that way. Math don't lie. And we're rapidly coming up against the hard wall of we're about to find out. This is going to be the ultimate FAFO. We're going to mess around and find out exactly what happens when you try and beat math and it doesn't work. Brad?
Well, I know we don't talk about like to talk about federal things on the show, but this one has a relevance to me. This issue has a relevance to me because we have a contested congressional seat this cycle, and our congressperson will have some influence on the outcome of this particular federal issue. And it is the budget. It is the direction that the federal budget is headed in. This past week, the Congressional Budget Office, which is the nonpartisan, I won't say bipartisan because it's not, it's nonpartisan, the nonpartisan arm of Congress, that study arm of Congress that looks at the budget and follows the numbers and publishes the numbers, a little bit like the Legislative Finance Division here at the state level, but not quite, because Legislative Finance Division is really run by the Senate Finance Chair. And in Congress, the CBO is really truly independent. It's not run by the chair of the finance committees or the Ways and Means committees. So it looked at the budget. It looks at the budget periodically. And this past week, it released its latest assessment, and it's a stunner. The Congressional, this is from the Committee for Responsible Federal Budget. And if anybody really wants to follow the numbers of what's going on with the budget, I suggest that you follow the Committee for Responsible Federal Budget, because they do really good work in analyzing and understanding the numbers of what's going on. This is from their summary. The Congressional Budget Office released its update to budget and economic outlook today, projecting that the national debt will set a new record as a share of the economy by 2027, while interest payments on the debt will approach their record as a share of the economy this year and exceed it next year. By 2034, the debt will grow to 120% of GDP compared to 99% at the end of fiscal year 24. So in the span of what CBO is projecting is in the span of 10 years from 2024 to 2034, the debt, national debt as a share of the economy is going to jump 23% from 99% where it is now to 122%. CBO increased its projection of the budget deficit to $1.9 trillion an annual number of 1.9 trillion in 2024, with interest payments of 892 billion this year, and interest payments totaling 13 trillion over the following decade. To put that in perspective, interest payments, the interest on the debt, which is really the year to year, the big impact of the debt, how much you have to pay in interest to finance the debt, what national organizations refer to as dead money, because you're paying off debt. You're not building anything. You're not doing anything with it. You're not providing any services. You're just paying off debt. And so it's viewed as dead money from that standpoint. The dead money is going to rise from with interest payments this year of 892 billion this year. That is, to put that in perspective, that is bigger than the number we spend on defense. It's bigger than the number we spend on Medicare. The biggest defense and the biggest non-defense programs we have out there. The estimate is that interest on the debt will outstrip Social Security Social Security payments in the next 10 years, becoming the single largest segment of the budget. Used to be, people said, oh, well, interest rates are so low, it doesn't matter what the debt is. We could run debt 200, 250, 300% of GDP. It really won't matter because interest rates are so low and interest costs will never amount to anything. Well, guess what? Interest rates did catch up, and interest costs are now swamping. And before anybody goes off and says, oh, Biden, Committee for Responsible Federal Budget did another analysis this week in anticipation of the run up to the debate this week between Trump and Biden. And again, you can find this, and these are just numbers. They're not trying to put a political spin on this. These are just numbers. That the net 10-year debt approved during Trump's term exceeds the net 10-year debt that has been adopted during the Biden administration, largely through the tax cuts, largely by reducing revenues. Trump is responsible for more of the increase in the debt that's going on now than Biden is. Biden's responsible. I mean, he's added to the debt also, but Trump has added to it. Has added to it more. So with that background, what I did was spend some time going through the candidates' positions, the congressional candidates' positions, because this is relevant to us in Alaska. What the hell are our congressional candidates saying about this and going to do about this? And I've just gone to their websites. I haven't gone to every speech they've given, and I'm sure they've all touched on it at some point. But I've gone to their websites to look at their priorities. And it's stunning the lack of focus on this problem. This may be the most serious problem the nation faces. I know there are a lot of problems. I know there are a lot of issues. But in terms of economics, this may be the growing debt and the growing interest payments may be the most serious problem the nation faces. And it's just, you go and look at their websites, it's not there. Nick Begich. These are his priorities: American energy first, protecting Alaskan jobs, protecting our freedom, educating the future, protecting our children, making healthcare affordable, national security, protecting financial sovereignty, which is all about Bitcoin. And that's it. There's nothing about getting the budget under control. There's nothing about balancing their budget. There's nothing about getting interest rates under control, the net interest costs at the federal budget level. Nothing. It's just, those are the priorities. You go to Nancy Dahlstrom. Here's her priorities: defend Alaska energy, end inflation. That has something to do with interest rates, but not really a whole lot. Defend Alaska energy, end inflation, and lower taxes. Lower taxes would put us into even more of a hole. Protect our freedoms, support public safety and the rule of law, stand with our military, bolster national security. Debt, interest costs, size of the federal budget, not a thing in there. And then you go to Mary Peltola, right? Fish, family, freedom. those are her priorities. Solutions for Alaska Natives child care and early education, empowering working Alaska families, food insecurity, infrastructure development, social security, choice, habitat resiliency, healthcare, LGBTQ and plus rights, schools, and veterans. Those are her priorities. Budget, interest costs, balancing the budget, reducing spending, nothing in there. So Michael, this is bad. This is really bad. That we don't have candidates who on their websites where they,
Right.
there's nobody getting in their way.
They interface with the world, right?
And they get to set their priorities.
I will say in fairness now, and I haven't spoken to Mary Peltola and I haven't spoken to Nancy Dahlstrom. I've reached out to both campaigns, haven't heard back. But we have had Nick on several times, and Nick, in almost every instance, we talk about the national debt, the budget, the overspending, those kind of things. We do talk about that, but you're right. If you're good, those are things that should be, because what's the number one thing when everybody does all these polls for people, like what's your top priority? The economy is always up there at the top. Almost always number one is the economy, because that's what people feel every time they go to the grocery store is the economy. And the economy all ties back in large part to federal spending, because that's what's driving the inflationary measures and all these other kind of things. So while he is talking about it on the trail, you're right. It should be right there front and center on the website. Math doesn't lie. You can't keep spending more than you take in and expect that it's all going to be okay.
He talks about it on the show and you bring it up. But here's I guess my point. The candidates are setting the priorities that their constituents are thinking about, right? I mean, some constituents are independent thinkers and go, oh, the budget. I mean, what's your position on the budget? But a lot are just sort of laid back and saying, well, the candidates will tell me what's important, and then I'll decide based on what they say is important between them. It's an educational opportunity that election cycles give you to talk about issues that are important, not only to talk about what your position is on that issue, but also to talk about the issues that are important, that what Alaskans ought to be thinking about, what Americans ought to be thinking about, and for the budget, and for spending levels, and for interest levels, not to break into the top, whatever the heck the number is on each of these websites, not to break into the top, and indeed it should be at the top, but not even to break into the ones you're talking about that you are self-selecting to talk about, you think are important enough to educate your constituents on. Not to break into the top is just astounding to me. And it's going to roll into the debate. I mean, the big issue in DC among these organizations, the Committee for a Responsible Federal Budget, the Concord Coalition, others, is will we have a debt question during the debate between Trump and Biden? And it's not certain we will. That there are other social issues and various other things that the moderators may ask about instead of the national debt. And that's just doing a huge disservice. It's a waste. It's sort of like the Fairbanks Newsminer editorial page, right? It's a waste of space, diverting Alaskans from things that they really can do something about and really matter. To run off this trail of all we need is Wally Hickel out there, as you said, digging the dirt for the pipeline. It's disappointing that we're not seeing these candidates talk about it. I've heard Nick talk about it on the show, and he has good thoughts about it. But I want a candidate. I'm looking for candidates who put that issue front and center, because that, to me, is the front and center issue that we ought to be talking about in this nation right now.
1 minute here, but how, I guess, to play devil's advocate for a minute, most people don't want to get down into the nitty gritty. Most, we're kind of wonkish here, right? I mean, we're into the national debt thing and talking about that. The average person, like you said, is just kind of laying back, and they're thinking about their household budget. They don't want to think about the national budget. So from a perspective of saleability and palatability to the voter, do you think that gets too far down into the weeds? I mean, is this the Ross Perot, let me do my whiteboard here and show you where the economy's going? Or what do you think, quickly?
It is the Ross Perot. I mean, Ross Perot drove Bill Clinton and drove us to a balanced budget by 2000, which Bush then undid. Bush Cheney then undid. But Ross Perot drove the agenda, drove the Clinton agenda. I know that from being around the people who were setting the Clinton agenda. I know that Ross Perot drove, James Carville to say it's the economy, stupid. Ross Perot's the perfect candidate. Yes, Ross Perot didn't win, but Ross Perot did the nation a great service with all those whiteboards. And I think that's exactly the type of thing that I would like to see one of these candidates kick off on.
All right, Brad Keithley, Alaskans for Sustainable Budgets, the weekly top 3. We're continuing on. We got one more dead ahead. Don't go anywhere. The Michael Duke Show continues. Common sense, liberty-based, free thinking radio. Back with more right after this.
If you missed the show, you can listen to it on your time with Dukes On Demand. Oh, and it's free. Like America used to be. Streaming live every weekday morning on Facebook Live and MichaelDukesShow.com.
Okay. Alaskans for Sustainable Budgets. Brad Keithley continues with us here. Sorry, just reading Gary's comment. The state reps need to keep the state population is important. Sorry, Brad, 90+% of Alaskans have not brought up the debt as they have issues right here, right now. The debt issue must be brought from the top with the Oval Office. If you want to see this first in line, then you need to run your platform. The average Alaskan is not passing that concern to the candidates. I mean, maybe that's what we're talking about. Maybe that's what I just was saying. I mean, is this too deep? Is this too wonkish for people? But I would also agree with Brad that the Ross Perot example shows that Americans do care about the economy if it's brought front and center. I mean, again, we know that in every poll, when they talk about major issues, immigration, defense, gun control, abortion, that the economy tops out in almost every one of those because it is the one thing that affects every voter directly. Maybe a voter is not affected by abortion or gun control or this or that, but the economy affects every one of them when they go to the grocery store. And so maybe it is a conversation that needs to be started by the candidates. Gary, I mean, I don't disagree with that.
I think the candidates have a responsibility. This is just me, but I think the candidates have a responsibility to use their platform to educate Alaskans. Now, I understand that you poll Alaskans. What do you want to hear about? What are the current burning issues to you? And I'll talk about those. But I think the candidates also have a responsibility to lead on issues and say, look, you may not be worried about this. You may not be worried about the national debt, but let me tell you, just like what Ross Perot did, let me tell you why you should be greatly concerned about the national debt. And I think candidates have a responsibility to do some of that. Now, they also have a responsibility to hit the issues that their constituents want to talk about. But I think they have a responsibility also to educate their constituents on the issues that are important out there.
Yeah, they're leaders, right? I mean, that's what we say. They're elected leaders. We need them to drive the conversation in that part as well. Yes, they need to listen to the constituency, but it is important. I mean, and if I was listening and I was part of like Nick Beggage's team, I would go rewrite that page, and at the top, I would put "It's the economy, stupid," in quotes, James Carville, Clinton, blah, 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 to show that, I mean, that's really what it is, and then talk about it because it is important. I mean, we had Nick on yesterday, and we were talking about, world reserve currency status and some of these other things. That's all directly tied to the economics of it. This thing, if it gets out of control, you got to realize
it is out of control.
If we hit that wall, you think if you think inflation's bad now, what do you think happens if we lose the world reserve currency status? What happens if we continue to borrow more than we can spend or spend more than we can borrow? What happens if we, get to that point to where, I mean, right now, the payback and the numbers from the CBO are, I mean, we saw the estimates last year. The interest payments were over $900 billion last year. The estimates were 1.2. So the CBO, which is considerable, continues to be very optimistic and very rosy at times. The numbers that we saw from last year said the estimate was going to be over 1.1, almost $1.2 billion in payments. They're saying, 900 billion. Again, we're talking about this huge, it's going to be the number one thing we're paying for with dead money that does nothing.
Part of what drives the CBO numbers is they have to assume by law, they have to assume the law as it is. And the law has the Trump tax cuts expiring next year, I think, or maybe the year after that. And so they assume the Trump tax cuts come off, that the tax rates return to what the tax code returns to what it was, because those were those were temporary tax changes. The tax rates return to what they were, and so the revenues start going up again. And so you can get higher number. I mean, but those numbers are scary enough. The number one thing the nation's going to be spending money on is dead money. Is going to be spending on dead things. You can get concerned enough about that. But if you really want to get, I mean, they do another analysis. I think it's called the alternate analysis, which is the current policy analysis. And that says, okay, well, maybe not all the tax cuts are going to expire. The Congress will extend some of those tax cuts. Then it gets even worse than that, and that'll get you the numbers that you were just talking about. But regardless, I mean, that's sort of a minor detail when you're talking about debt costs, interest costs at that level, interest costs that exceed the cost of defense. What we're spending on national defense exceed the cost of the biggest, other than Social Security, the biggest non-defense program, Medicare.
Right. $1 trillion a year in debt service. What does that do for us in the long run? Well, newsflash, it ain't good. That's what happens for when it's $1 trillion a year. All right. 5 seconds. Let's jump back into it. The Michael Duke Show, common sense, liberty-based, free thinking radio. Here we go.
Public enema number one. Oh, wait, sorry. Public enemy number one, which makes more sense. On the other hand, he's a little bit of a pain in the Michael Duke Show.
Brad Keithley, Alaskans for sustainable budgets. Dead money, dead presidents, and dead ahead. Yes, it's Death Tuesday. No. It's the weekly top three.
It's Truth Tuesday. I'm going to keep pounding on that now.
Truth Tuesday, which does have some nice alliteration. Death Tuesday just doesn't sound quite the same. Number 3 of the weekly top 3. It's another nail in the coffin for the Cook Inlet. And by the way, where is the RCA, Brad? I read this and my eyes were rolling so far back in the back of my head, they almost got stuck there as I read some of these articles in this piece. Go ahead.
Well, the state put out put out the Cook Inlet, state waters in the Cook Inlet for lease. Had a lease sale for Cook Inlet, not only Cook Inlet waters, but onshore Cook Inlet also, just the Cook Inlet region generally. The state put out a lease sale, oil and gas lease sale. And the state did, as they have the authority to do, as the executive branch has the authority to do under statute. The state offered lease terms for new leases that had no minimum royalty in them. All the leaseholder had was the obligation to pay a portion of its net profits in the event it finds anything and develops it and is able to run with it. All it owes the state is net profits. And the state went out with lease terms like that. And that's similar to what some of the legislative proposals have been to eliminate royalty or reduce royalty down. And the state went out and ran with those terms, and it got 3 bids, all from Hillcorp, and all basically on the margins of already existing fields. Nothing out there in terms of major exploration plays or major exploration efforts or new thoughts or new areas that the producers wanted to explore, even at these reduced terms. It got 3 bids, all from Hillcorp, and it was a failure. I mean, the lease sale was a failure in terms of what you would have expected listening to the legislative hearings and listening to all all of the discussion about if you just eliminate royalties, we'll have this boom in gas failure. Now, John Boyle, the Commissioner of Natural Resources, makes a good point in that he said you can't judge the success or failure of what might happen if you reduced royalties on existing leases by what happens in a new lease sale. And the point Boyle was trying to make is, look, a lot of the Cook Inlet region is already leased up. And part of the concern is people aren't developing what they know to be there because of high costs. And if we reduced, but they're already under existing leases, and if we reduce the royalty on those leases, then we might get additional an incentive for additional investment in those leases. But here's the thing that I just chuckle every time I see Boyle say that, or anybody from the administration say that, or any legislator say that. The administration already has the authority to reduce royalties on existing leases. There's already a statute that provides the administration can do that. They don't want to do it. They because the producer has to demonstrate that the reduction in royalty is necessary to incentivize the additional investment and has to commit to make the additional investment. And DNR is concerned that producers either A, can't demonstrate that that's really the problem, that the royalty is really the problem, or that the producers will be willing to make the investments necessary to develop it if DNR reduces the royalty. So what DNR wants to happen and what the producers want to happen is the legislature just to do it unilaterally, just drop the royalties unilaterally, and maybe some producers will make additional investments as a result of that. It's just, I mean, for Boyle to say that, oh, you can't use this to judge what would happen if we drop the royalty on existing leases is technically correct. But John, you've got the solution in your own pocket. Just say that you will consider, and you have said that you'll consider these applications, but producers aren't making the applications because they don't want to make the commitments. They just want to talk about it a lot, sort of use it as an excuse for not developing additional supplies. In any event, the lease sale was a failure. It demonstrated that dropping the royalties on new leases, eliminating the royalty entirely, turning it into a net profits, eliminating the royalty entirely isn't going to result in this boom and additional development out there that everybody thinks it's doing. And so that has, by experience, that's sort of moving off the table. One by one, we're crossing out all of these alternatives that people have claimed will lead to additional supplies out of the Cook Inlet, and proving that that's really not what's going on. That the economics in the Cook Inlet have changed so much that people just aren't going to develop additional gas supplies. That's what's really going on, and that we're moving inexorably to LNG imports. That's where the state is moving to. But we're taking so damn long to go through this process that we're moving the point at which we can have these LNG supplies in way past the point where we're going to need those supplies.
Right.
And putting ourselves at risk of having this gap period that where the only way to fill the gap is going to be with very expensive LNG supplies coming in through, small cylinders, and the cost of those is huge. And so we're extending this gap period while we're people are talking about and running around in circles about these other alternatives. That's a problem, and that gap period and delaying the decision on going ahead and setting up for LNG imports, that is the cause. That's going to be the cause of higher prices in the Cook Inlet for South Central consumers, if that's where we end up. And the agency responsible, we'll get back to the RCA, the agency responsible for overseeing this and making sure that doesn't happen, with the responsibility of ensuring that that consumers only pay the lowest reasonable cost, the Regulatory Commission of Alaska, They haven't held a hearing on this. They haven't challenged the producers, at least on the record, or not the producers. They haven't challenged the utilities to say, what are you doing about this? They haven't, asked the utilities to come in and even update on the record, even update the report that the utilities did last year that said, hey, we got a problem here, and LNG is the solution to it. They haven't done anything. In fact, the RCA, who holds at least one public hearing a month, maybe two, where they do these broad scale discussions. The next public hearing is set for later this month. Well, this week, June 26th. And
Tomorrow.
Tomorrow. Thank you.
Tomorrow. Yeah.
And the only thing that's on the agenda, other than some administrative stuff, is a presentation on China and the risk to corporate America, current Chinese laws, and critical infrastructure update, including cybersecurity and risk mitigation best practices, from a person from the FBI. Well, I agree that China's a problem. I agree that the risk of cybersecurity is a problem. And I agree that we ought to be talking about that. And I agree the RCA ought to be talking about that. But you can have more than one thing on an agenda.
Right.
And talking about the Cook Inlet and what the utilities are doing to bring additional supplies to meet their service obligations at the lowest reasonable cost, talking about what utilities are doing would seem to be at least equal to China, if not a little bit ahead of China. But is the RCA talking about that? No. I mean, it's Michael, we're going to run into a problem. We're putting ourselves in a situation by delaying action. We're putting ourselves in a situation where we're creating this gap period where we're going to have a huge problem. And we know what the solution is. We know where we're going to be at the end of that gap period, but we're wasting time. Sort of like the Fairbanks. If there's a theme here, it's we're wasting time. We're wasting time, doing other things before we get there.
Yeah, no, I mean, I could see that for sure. Now, there is a public participation component of that meeting. Maybe, Brad, you need to get up early tomorrow at 9 a.m. and go make a 2-minute or 3-minute presentation on this but I mean, they should be hip deep in this right now. This is enough of a crisis. They should be hip deep in this. This should be the number one topic for Alaska specifically on this, but it's just not, it's not going to work out. Brad Keithley, Alaskans for Sustainable Budgets. Thank you so much for coming on board. As always, good to talk with you.
Michael, as always, thanks for having me on Truth Tuesday.
Truth Tuesdays, the weekly top three. Brad Keithley. All right, folks, we're out of time. Be kind, love one another, live well. We'll see you in hour 2 if you're going to stick around. Back with more. Did you speak to the RCA, or did you got in front of, you spoke to the RCA about this already, right?
I did a public participation a couple of months ago, I think, and talked about it and hoped that would trigger some additional. I mean, what the RCA has done is they've hauled in the utilities and they've said, okay, what's your plan if you run short of gas? What does your tariff currently provide if you run short of gas? And had the utilities come in and talk about that. And that's not a bad thing to talk about. I mean, yeah. What happens if we do run short of gas? What happens if this coming winter or the winter after that, we have a gas shortage? The wells in NSTAR storage field go down and we have a gas shortage. What's your plan for that? Good thing to talk about. But, avoiding the shortage, avoiding that condition would seem to be at least as high a priority as what are you going to do if it happens? And I truly am concerned that we're just, by running through all of these hoops, these hoops that end up in dead ends. Oh, we're going to have gas down from the gas pipeline from the North Slope. We're going to have, additional Cook Inlet development. We're going to drop the royalty. We're going to reduce the royalty on new leases. We're going to drop by running through all of these hoops, all of which are failing. By running through all of these hoops before we get to the solution, we're just extending this gap period farther and farther out. And it will be expensive. I mean, people talk about LNG being expensive. It will be expensive to bring it up by cylinder, which is sort of the only option we're going to have. Cylinders on barges is going to be the only option we have if we don't have an LNG regasification facility installed by the time this happens. So there is a true cost that's being created here by extending the gap period, and the utilities are responsible for it, for not pressing forward, getting on the dime and saying, we got to make this decision. Here's the decision and here's the support for it. Here's the phase 2 report that we've been hiding all this time. But the RCA is complicit in this by not jumping up and down on the utilities and saying, what are you doing about it? So when the time comes, when the gap comes, and when we're bringing it up by cylinder and energy costs in South Central skyrocket, it's not because Cook Inlet ran short of gas. It's not because, the gas pipeline didn't get down here. It's because of the delays that were created by running in these circles that we're doing right now.
Right. It's a lot. Again, it's a lot of this wishful thinking. And again, this kind of emotional response of it's got to be Alaska gas. We've got to find a solution with Alaska gas. We can't look at anything else. And again, I'm kind of a prepare for the worst and hope for the best kind of guy, and if you haven't prepared for the worst and at least have all your ducks in a row and things prepared, by the time the crisis gets here, you're so far behind the power curve, it's going to cost a lot of money to make all that work. Because now it'll be a crisis, and now you'll be in a crunch time, and instead of planning it out and having it done ahead of time and having it cost a reasonable amount of money, now whatever they do will be it'll be millions of dollars more, and we'll all be paying for it.
Yeah. And it's as I say, it's in part the utilities' fault, because they're the ones that have the certificate, the obligation to serve. They're the ones that have the obligation to ensure that they have adequate supply at a reasonable cost. And their failure to even release the phase 2 report. I mean, come on. You've got the report. The report tells us something. Release it so we all can know what it says, so Alaskans can know what we're facing. But their failure to plan is a huge problem. But we've got a backup to that. The RCA, the Regulatory Commission of Alaska, we've got a backup regulator that's supposed to make sure that the utilities live up to their obligation to serve. And their failure, frankly, when the history is written on this, at least when I write the history, their failures is going to play as big a role in this as the failure of the utilities to do it in the first instance. Well,
I mean, again, where is the phase 2 report? Right. I mean, that's the biggest thing. I mean, you said it, you hyped this report that was coming out and everything, and was going to give us more information, and then radio silence for months. And that just leads me to believe that this report says something that you don't want out in the public, which is essentially, I think, I'd lay good money on the fact that it says it's going to be cheaper to import gas than anything else at this point, because the economics just don't work out. There's not the economy of scale needed. That's just, I mean, it's just, I can write the report right now. I can tell you what it's going to be. If we ever see it, I bet that's what it says. All right. The amount of times where we have these self-inflicted wounds, where we know we can see the end coming, we know the bridge is out, we know we could stop the train, and we just don't do it, I just can't fathom it. Just can't fathom it.
And it's the responsibility of thought leaders like the Fairbanks Newsminer editorial page, like the candidates for Congress, like the RCA. It's the responsibility of thought leaders to get out in front of that train and say, look, the bridge is out. We need to slow the train down. We need to divert the train to another track. We need to do something. It's the responsibility of those thought leaders. I mean, we put them in that position by saying they're leaders. We put them in that position by electing them. We put them in the position by, reading the Newsminer. And it's their failure, the failure of the thought leaders, to get out in front and say the bridge is out. Alaskans don't have it as one of their top 10 because their thought leaders haven't done the responsible thing and say, look, this ought to be in your top 10. And that's, so I blame I blame them as much as anybody else.
Quickly, Brad, what are you looking at next week?
I think next week is going to be the permanent fund and returns on the permanent fund. There was a hearing yesterday before LBNA that I thought was interesting, that I'm going to dig into and talk about a little bit. Should be some updated performance numbers coming out of the Permanent Fund Corporation in the meantime. So next week's going to be about the permanent fund.
All right, Brad Keithley, Alaskans for Sustainable Budgets. Thank you, my friend. Good to talk with you. All right, folks, we got to go. Hour 2, dead ahead.
Whoa, buddy. Put that thing back in its holster. We haven't gone anywhere.
I don't understand.
Check out the MichaelDukesShow.com for information on how to get access to the podcast.
Welcome to the party, pal.
The Michael Dukes Show.
The greed and the entitlement is astounding to me.
What more could you want from a low-budget radio program?
This is a dumpster fire.
That was just BS.
It is time to get a new perspective.
We know just what you need, and we've got just the cure. Open wide and prepare for a steaming hot cup of freedom.
I just don't fathom it.
The Michael Dukes Show, streaming live across the world.
Live around the world on the interwebs at michaeldukeshow.com and across the state of Alaska on this, your favorite radio station and or FM translator. Hello, my friends. It is the Tuesday edition of the Michael Dukes Show, and we just finished up with Brad Keithley from Alaskans for Sustainable Budgets with the weekly top 3 Truth Tuesday. Or we like to call it the Baton Death March of radio. Anyway, it is, just some amazing things that we discussed in this last hour, and I want to extrapolate on them a little bit, for a couple different reasons. I have some deeper thoughts on it, and I interject with Brad, but I don't want to necessarily interrupt him when he's on a roll, and I want to hear what he has to say on it. So I take a good chunk of the second hour to kind of go over that myself and give you my thoughts on everything that he was talking about. So we're going to start off with that and kind of kick that around a little bit. I want to talk to begin with about this opinion piece in the Newsminer, the Fairbanks Daily Newsminer. Which, again, I have not read in its entirety. I've read several excerpts of it, but again, I refuse to give the Newsminer money because I just can't read a single article without paying $100 a year. And I'm not about that life. Anyway, this is part of the problem. We keep getting distracted by the fantasy that somehow, some way, we're going to be able to create this gas line to Tidewater, or a bullet line, a pencil line down to South Central and just feed South Central, or again, the large diameter pipe to Tidewater for export, or all these other things. And the problem is that nobody is paying attention to the overall economics of this. Nobody is paying attention to the what really drives these kinds of projects, which is the financing. The financing. You've got to get people to stand behind you and invest in these projects. And as of right now, the return has not been shown to be good enough or in a short enough period of time to be able to make it happen. Look, I was an advocate for an Alaska gas pipeline for years. Years and years and years. And do I think we could do it cheaper than maybe some of the numbers that have been penciled out? Yeah, maybe. But again, you'd have to get the finances behind it to be able to push it forward. And so far, you just can't do that. There's just not enough. There's just not enough backing to be able to make that happen. So we could continue to lament the fact that we don't have a way to get all of this stranded gas to market, right? I mean, 17 trillion cubic feet of gas. That's a lot of gas, right? That's a lot of natural gas that we have up on the North Slope, a huge amount of natural gas. And wouldn't it be great if we could burning it in homes from Fairbanks and to Nenana and down to, Talkeetna and Denali and all the way to Anchorage and down all the way to Homer? I mean, wouldn't it be great if we could burn Alaskan? Oh, it would be awesome. It would be awesome. But it's just like me saying, what if we were able to put a nuclear battery in every small village everywhere in the state of Alaska to get them to run the power? Wouldn't that be awesome? It has about as much chance of happening. Do I want to burn Alaska gas in Alaska homes? Yes, absolutely. That would make, that would be poetic. The problem is, how do you get it from where it's at to where it needs to be consumed? And if all we do is focus on the, this near impossibility, now this, you can't, you've got to be hopeful and positive, and I am trying to be positive, but you also have to make contingencies for what if the worst happens, right? What if the worst happens? What if we run low on gas? What does that do? Well, I remember when I kept saying that I moved down from Fairbanks, and the first thing that I noticed was that my utilities were just slashed. Well, we'd see a reverse of that. Instead of paying $150 or $200 a month to heat my home in the winter, I might have to pay $600 or $700 or $800 a month like I used to do in Fairbanks. I mean, that could happen. So how do we avoid that? Well, we need to be planning for the ability to import gas. And part of it's already stood up, right? You've got the Marathon plant. It needs to be, rejiggered to make it work, but it's doable. They've already got some of the permits. They've already got the storage. They've got all this stuff because it was an export LNG terminal. Why don't we start turning that around now? Instead of waiting for the crisis to be upon us and then be running around like a chicken with with their heads cut off. Well, at some point I start to get a little cynical and wonder, is this all on purpose? Are they doing this? Are they all in it together? And are they all doing it on purpose? As old Hillbilly used to say, they're all in it together and they're all doing it on purpose. I mean, is that what it is? That they know that when crisis comes, then they can pad the budgets and then they could do whatever it takes at whatever cost because people are screaming about their heating being shut off or rolling blackouts or whatever the problem is. Is it intentional? I mean, that couldn't be possible, right? That they would intentionally wait until it's a crisis moment and then get the job. They wouldn't do that. I mean, really? They wouldn't do that, would they? I mean, I would hope not. I mean, maybe I'm just being cynical. Maybe it's the cynic in me, the more distrustworthy part of my nature where I distrust everything. But when I look at this, and the more that I look it in the face and I talk to people and I'm like, okay, so here's the thing. We could get Alaska gas to market from the North Slope, but the cost is going to be significantly higher. It's going to be a longer term. It's going to be more time and everything else. The easiest thing to do would be to reverse the export facility, turn it into an import facility, and sign a long-term contract, 10-year maybe, with a delivery of natural gas. So at least we take the pressure off now, and now we can figure out how do we make those economics work. Is there a way to do it cheaper? Can we build more rail cars? I see Kevin in the chat room says rail is the answer. Finance for rail is readily available. North Slope to Point Mac. Okay, how many rail cars do we have that can haul LNG? Okay, how much rail do we have to lay from Fairbanks to the North Slope? How many LNG cars? How many trains does that mean a day? I mean, we need to start doing the math on that, right? Does that work out? Does it make sense to put a export facility on the North Slope and put tankers and run them around get an icebreaker and run them around the coast and bring them all the way down? Does that make sense? I mean, we can start looking at these ideas, but again, all of this is going to take time and money. And if we keep putting energy into things like the Fairbanks Daily Newsminer did, we need to create that gas line, that all Alaska gas line. I mean, folks, I remember sitting in the office of then Mayor Jim Whitaker of the Fairbanks North Star Borough, who was a big guy about LNG and getting a gas line. He was the president of the Fairbanks Port Authority, which was there for build. And he had a framed thing on his wall behind his desk. It was a framed newspaper, full page newspaper. And it said, gas line coming next year, or gas line to be built next year. And it was a newspaper from like 1961 or something. I mean, we've been talking about this gas line for decades. Decades. And the financing, the wherewithal, the economics have just never worked out for private investment. That's why for a while they were going back to the state, or the state needs to be the owner, or the state needs to run it, or China could finance it, or all these other things that are going on. That's the only way they could make it work economically, is if for government to pay, which means you pay. It means you pay. But maybe it's more hidden now. Maybe your fuel bill stays low, but your PFD gets totally taken. Or maybe there's some form of new taxes that are paid. But at least your fuel bill stayed low, right? At least your fuel bill stayed down there. We've got to stop living at this pie in the sky. I'm not saying we don't keep looking at it. I'm not saying we don't keep exploring options. I'm not saying we don't keep throwing things into the rotating rotor to see what sticks. I'm not saying that we're not doing that, but we got to quit living in a fantasy world of this Alaska gas is the only way we can do it. Because again, look at what's going on with the food. It's cheaper to bring the food up from the lower 48 than it is to try and manufacture it, raise it, produce it here. Now, that brings its own set of problems. Don't get me wrong. I mean, the whole food security issue and everything, that brings its own set of problems. But you got to survive in the short term to worry about those long-term problems, right? And that's where we're at. We're talking about in, maybe 2 years, this crisis comes to a head. And all of a sudden, we don't have, now we're backs against a wall where we have to do something right there, right now. And now, instead of doing it ahead of time and doing it at our leisure and having a plan and having that plan be executed and being things ready, that when the gas does run dry, you simply reach over and grab a lever and pull it, and there's your imported gas. Okay, we're ready to go. Now it's a crisis. And again, my cynical side is coming out, but then money is no object. The state will throw hundreds of millions of dollars at a solution because all the constituencies are freaking out because of the ripple effect of rail belt utilities and the intertie and, everything else. I mean, then everybody's going to be all a clamor. And then money will be no object. So, I mean, maybe that is part of the plan. I don't know. And yes, I mean, Kevin says, just think about how cheap we could get food to Alaska if we had rail to the lower 48. I mean, just think about how great it would have been to have built that out right alongside the Alcan. What if we just built out a railroad right alongside the highway? Yes, that would have been great. But again, woulda, coulda, shoulda. Right? Woulda, coulda, shoulda. Just think about how great it would have been if the United States government has kept its promise to Alaska to build out the infrastructure like they did in many of the other states out there. What if we had more roads? What if we had more, we wouldn't have to fly everything out to the bush? What if we did all those things? It would have been great. But you can't live on the if come, right? Well, only if we'd have this, it would have been good. You got to live on the income. You can't live on the if come. If only I'd made some more money this year. You just can't do it. What if we'd built a pipeline? What if we built a fleet of dirigibles and shipped everything by air, slow boat? Oh, that would have been great. What if we created a channel from Seattle to Anchorage and just drove everything under the channel just like they did from England to France? That would have been great. I mean, it's ridiculous. But you know what I mean? What if? The thing is, we have to be grounded in now and what is coming. I mean, it's astonishing. It's astonishing that we're still hyping over this freaking gas line when the economics over the last 15 years have shown us that it's just not going to work the way they said it. That the economics are just not going to work out. I'm so sorry. Nobody wants to back a $40 billion pipeline that has payouts in the multiple decades for it to be economically feasible. It's just not going to work. Okay. We got more coming up. I'm going to talk in just a minute about the economy and what Brad was talking about with the congressional candidates. We'll continue that here in just a moment. The Michael Duke Show, common sense, liberty-based, free-thinking radio. Back with more. Chris Story coming up at the end of the show today.
Listened to by more staffers in Juneau than any other show because their bosses told them to. And after what they just heard, oh man, they're going to be pissed.
You're a bad, bad man.
The Michael Duke Show.
What if? Yes. What if we had built a pipeline? What if we had built a natural gas pipeline right along the easement of the Trans-Alaska pipeline? Because that was part of the original plan, right? You see it on some of those bridges, the trestles, the pipeline only fills up half the trestles, and then there's an empty spot. There was a whole discussion. They were going to build a natural gas pipeline. They were going to do that, and they didn't. What if they had built that gas line to Tidewater along with the Trans-Alaska pipeline? We could have been exporting gas all this time. I mean, maybe we could have built a spur line or a bullet line off of that to Anchorage, or maybe we could have shipped gas from Valdez to Anchorage or down to the Kenai Peninsula to be put in a gasification plant there. I mean, who knows? There's so many things. What if we could have done that? What if we'd only had a little bit more foresight? I mean, what if? What if? Terry said, when my parents worked, my mom's income paid my dad's taxes. Yep. That happens a lot, Terry. I got into more trouble one day when I detailed that out in a show that I have a woman who still hates me to this day because I did the math on that one day on the air. And my whole point is that in many cases, both parents working didn't make a lot of sense because taxes and tax brackets and costs and everything else. She took it as, I thought that women should be barefoot and pregnant in the kitchen making me a sandwich. That's what she took from it. I mean, I didn't care who stayed home. I was just making the point that it doesn't always make sense to have a double income, depending on what your profession is, obviously, and your how high your salary is. But she's still mad. Somebody talked to her last year and mentioned my name, and she just, wow, it happens. But there was no market for natural gas. Remember how tightly regulated oil and natural gas markets are. Yeah, I mean, I'm just saying, what if? I'm just saying, what if? What if we'd done that and built a railroad through Canada into the, for the lower 48? What if both of those things? Man, you imagine where we'd be today? High cotton, natural gas in-state, and a railroad? How many dividends would that have paid out? Not permanent fund dividends, but how much would that have paid us back over the years for that investment? If ifs were fifths, we'd all be drunk. That's true. That's right, Fat Ray. Thank you. If ifs were fifths, we'd all be drunk. Foresight and courage take risk. Foresight and courage to take a risk. What happened to the Alaska Spirit? Politics. It is the only long 4-letter word that I know. Politics. It is what it is. What if? Brian says, Rick, he's responding to something Rick said. Let me go back here. Brian, wait a second. Let me go. Brian was the beginning. Okay. I think this is the original. I don't have time to go into this. Let me highlight all these real quick so that I can know that this is Brian and this is Rick and this is Brian. I want to highlight this. Okay. Here we go. We're going to jump back into it. The Michael Duke Show. Common sense, liberty-based, free-thinking radio. Like, share, subscribe, ring the bell, do all the YouTube-y stuff, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Let's get to it. Let's go. Let's do this thing. Whoops. There we go. Jumping in.
The Michael Duke Show. Seriously humorous with a pinch of intellect. Sorry. That is humorous. Here's Michael Dukes.
Okay. Sorry, we were just doing the what if. Well, what if this had happened? And what if that had happened? Well, I mean, again, if I was a fictional author, I could write alternate timelines for all this stuff. If only we'd done all these things all this time, it would be great. And then Fat Ray brought us all back down to earth when he said, if ifs were fifths, we'd all be drunk. That's true. I mean, if all we could say, what if this, what if that? It doesn't matter. It's about as much use as getting drunk. That's about it. You feel bad, you get all confused, and then you feel bad the next day. That's pretty much it. All right. I want to come back to this issue of that Brad was talking about with the economics, the national debt, and this piece from the Committee for a Responsible Federal Budget. This little piece talking about the CBO releasing their updated budget and economic outlook. They put this out about 5-6 days ago. And the thing is, I just don't know how loud before somebody manages to wander around to try and find a fire extinguisher or call the fire department, right? The house is on fire. It's not just on fire. It's like the garage is fully engulfed and we're still standing around in the living room having cocktails. Like it's all going to be fine. Fine. Just fine. Don't worry about it. It's fine. Just fine. This is fine. That's where we're at today. Right? They not pay. We know that the bad time is coming. We know based on arithmetic and math that you can't keep spending more than you take in forever. You can't keep printing money through quantitative easing and other mechanisms before it has an effect on the monetary supply, before it drives a inflationary wedge in, before it starts to affect the confidence of those other actors who borrow our money, who take U.S. bonds, who are paying for the money we're borrowing. You know, if somebody buys $100,000 worth of U.S. debt, and we quantitatively ease because we're the world reserve currency, we can get away with it, and what they receive in return is inflated money, so they're really only getting $80,000 back. I'm sorry, let's try this again. All right, we'll try that. And you're only getting $80,000 back of your $100,000 investment. How many more $100,000 investments are you going to get if you only got $80,000 worth of buying power back because the sucker printed more money when you weren't looking and they paid you back, but now your buying power is depressed? I mean, how many times are you going to do that? How many times are you going to get that hand that bites you that you're going to turn around and go, oh, I'll do that again? And here we are. $1 trillion in interest payments. $1 trillion in interest payments this year. Maybe even more. Again, and that depends in the future as to whether or not the Trump tax cuts are gonna happen again. And I know people are like, well, Brad got tax cuts and he says that's a bad thing. I think tax cuts are a good thing because it would traditionally, tax cuts would force the government to live within their means even more, but no, they just borrow more. So it does add to the problem. But taxation is theft, and so give me that money back. And if the federal government fails, okay. I mean, it'll be catastrophic, don't get me wrong. It'll be blood in the streets and it would be messy, but okay. You know, if they didn't have the power to quantitatively ease, to print more money, to borrow more, if they didn't have that power, when they offered you a tax cut, guess what would happen? Government would shrink. That's unthinkable to people, though. The people in power, they can't think about that. They look at these numbers, and these numbers are so staggeringly huge, they just blithely go, oh, don't worry. We're too big to fail. It would never happen here. $1.9 trillion in deficit this year alone. Interest payments of $1 trillion. And interest payments over the next decade of $13 trillion. That's money. Brad called it dead money. I thought that was a great phrase because it adequately describes what happens with that money. That money is not being invested. That money is not going into savings to grow a nest egg. That money is not going to pay, the Uber driver for your dinner. It's not paying salaries. It's not paying wages. It's not going back. It is dead money that does nothing but pay for things that we already bought decades ago. And yet these knuckleheads in Congress get up there and they tell you how it's all going to be great, right? Don't worry about it. we're too big to fail. I know that we can't pass a budget. We just do these continuing resolutions and we can't be bothered to have regular order and do the things that we're supposed to do. But you don't worry, Johnny. Don't worry your little head. We got this. And of course, when it turns out that we don't got this, they'll be gone. Those Congress critters built their little happy bungalow in Appalachia, or they built some super bunker in West Texas or something, or they bought some Caribbean island, and they don't care. They're going to be sipping mojitos on the beach while the country's tearing itself apart because, well, they prepared. Well, maybe some of them. Some of them are just too stupid to know. They truly believe that we're too big to fail. They are not students of history. And this is the stuff that is going to kill this country. And in all honesty, we are reaching a tipping point to where I don't care how much you shout from the rooftops that this is a problem. It's going to be too late. I think we're rapidly approaching that point to where there's that tipping point, right? Where you go too far forward and you can't, the car's over the cliff and you're sitting on the bumper and you can't, it's just too far forward. We're rapidly approaching that point where we cannot pull back from that fiscal cliff. And then what happens? Well, we all get hurt. And because it's a globally intertwined economy, that creates problems worldwide. And tell me again, what happens when there's a global financial catastrophe? What does that lead to? Oh, in some cases, military interventionism? Yes, military adventurism and interventionism. I could see something. I mean, could you see that? I mean, people, when you got nothing to lose, if the economy across the globe is in free fall and you got nothing to lose, you think old grudges won't be settled sometime? I mean, am I painting a gloom and doom picture? This is Death Tuesdays after all, right? Am I painting a gloom and doom picture? Maybe. What I'm trying to say is we can pull it back now. But that clock is ticking down. There will be a point where no matter how hard we pull on that handbrake, the train is still going off the end of the tracks. That's a huge deal. That's a huge deal. And again, just the number of the fact that we are spending more on debt service than we are on defense, that we are on Medicaid. It will become the largest single item of the budget every year, consuming upwards of a quarter or more of the annual budget to pay for the debts. You tell me, as a homeowner, as a family budget, if you could afford year after year to spend a quarter of your income on debt service, all while racking up more debt, how would that work out for you? I mean, I'm asking for a friend. Right? How is that gonna work out for you? It's only a quarter of my income. I can afford that. Let's rack more debt up. I got questions. All right, the Michael Duke Show. Chris Story's up next. Common sense, liberty-based, free-thinking radio.
We're broadcasting live through a series of tubes.
Allowing all of these entities to provide streaming stuff going on the internet.
Well, it's kind of hard to explain. Sorry. streaming live every weekday morning on Facebook Live and MichaelDukesShow.com.
Okay. Trying to talk myself off the ledge here. What do we got here? We would not have to go to the Masters in DC and get permission. If the whole thing came unstuck? No, man, you'd be scrambling to survive. If the federal government would fail, would Alaska then become fully sovereign? Would that be a bad thing if true? Well, the problem is that we are so interdependent on so many things. I mean, we talked about food security earlier. I mean, what happens if the whole United States, comes unstuck? What happens if the government, defaults and the money collapses and everything else? You think they're going to worry about Alaska as far as getting the groceries to somebody way out here? Or are they going to focus on these big mega cities with millions of people in a small geographic area, or are they going to worry about a few 100,000 people way up there in Alaska all by ourselves? And if Putin is still the strong man at that time, you don't think old grudges would be resettled? You don't think that? I mean, I'm just wondering, That's, and Ron says, no, we all don't get hurt. Only the lower and middle class get hurt. The upper echelon can afford the high prices and they don't care about us lower vermin. Ron, I would say the ultra high class might be able to afford it or might be prepared. But I think you would find that the lower, middle, and upper class, probably the top 98% would, or the lowest 98% would feel the pain. Maybe those elitist top 1%, 2%, 3%, they may be able to avoid most of it, but only if they're prepared. I mean, wheelbarrows full of money for a loaf of bread. I just want to put that in perspective. That's what history shows. Wheelbarrows of money, where you had to get paid multiple times a day for your job, because from the time you got up in the morning to the time you went to bed at night, the money had deflated so much that you literally had to go out on your lunch break, get paid, go buy some stuff, and then buy some stuff again after you got paid, because the money had devalued even further in the few working hours that you had. That's the kind of stuff we're talking about. But yeah. All right, let's see if this thing works. And it didn't work. I'm going to call you back. We're going to try this again. Why is this not? Hey, look, I can hear that. Let's try this one more time. Come on. There we go.
Ah, there you are. Sounds fantastic.
Yeah, there you go. How are you, my friend? How are you doing? What's going on?
That's wonderful.
How are you doing? What's going on?
Like, what was that from Blazing Saddles? Like regional gibberish or Plainsman gibberish?
Yeah, something like that. Yeah, regional gibberish or something. Yeah, yeah, that guy was funny. I'm only here to lighten your day. You're not here to lighten mine.
Mm-hmm.
You said today's topic was invisible wealth.
Yes, hiding in plain sight.
You said morning today, invisible wealth, and my phone has suggested to send a coffee selfie. I don't know what that is. I don't know what a coffee.
Just send coffee.
I strike a
Leave
pose.
off the selfie, just send coffee.
I don't know. So I sent a coffee selfie. I just did what the phone told me to do. Okay.
Oh,
there you go.
You were definitely ready for the Weimar Republic. You are.
I am ready.
Going to be.
I was only following orders. All right. So Chris Story is our guest, the man from Homer. Wow, I really got on a tear there in the last segment. Mm-hmm. You need to talk me off the ledge, Story. You need to talk me off the ledge. What's going on? How are you doing? What's happening in your world? Give us the rundown here.
I couldn't be happier. I'm not weather dependent. You know that. I have good days no matter what's going on. I like to look at the optimist side of the world and wake up on top of this delicious world. But I don't know. There's something about working outside in the sun that just rejuvenates the soul. It's good. And I've been really enjoying this summer, I have to tell you. It feels like a real summer.
It does feel like a real, I mean, not to put too fine a point on it, but last summer sucked balls. I mean, that summer, it was, what do we have? 4 days
I'm
of
sure
the
I wouldn't
entire,
know.
four days of the entire summer that was even halfway decent. And this summer, it has just been, I mean, so far it's been going on 10 days of just beautiful, beautiful weather. I'm with you.
Soak it up.
Standing outside sometimes, just enjoying that vitamin D as it comes in through your skin, it does make a difference. It does make a huge difference.
Maybe the nudists have it right.
Maybe the, I got to think about that. All right. Chris Story, the man from Homer, invisible wealth is going to be the topic for today. Let's get into it. Here we go. Please like, please share, subscribe, ring the bell, do all that stuff. Let's do it. All right. One final segment. Now that I beat the hell out of you for 40 minutes, it's time to bring on the cleanup crew. The man, the myth, the legend in his own mind. Chris Story joins us this morning to give us a little bit of a positivity boost. Today, he's going to talk about invisible wealth. Where is it? I can't see it. It's there. No, it's there. I can't find it. Where is it? Chris, what's happening?
Good morning, Michael. It's like chasing butterflies. Actually, you don't chase butterflies. If you've ever been a kid in the summer, you know what you need to do. You need to sit down in the grass and let the butterfly come to you. And that really is a great description of what most of success is really about. And of course, you got to take action. But I do mean if you're chasing dollars or wealth, you might be doing it wrong. In other words, there might be an invisible wealth hiding in plain sight just within your reach, and you're not taking advantage of it. And until you do, maybe the rest of what you consider to be success will elude you as well.
Okay. I mean, there may be. I heard a lot of may and might and possibly in there. So how do we?
This is called the long tease.
Right.
I'm just trying to tease this out. Get it?
I see that. I see that now. So
I mean, don't make me show how the donuts are made.
Yeah.
Just play along. Come on.
I'm sorry. Donuts are delicious. You had me at donuts. I forgot everything else after you said
By
donuts.
the way, there's a new bakery in Homer. When you next come to Homer, you got to go to BB's Bakery on Ocean Drive Loop. It's not a commercial. I'm just saying it looks amazing. So we have a bakery back.
Nice. All right. We'll have to go check that out. I love me some baked goods. There's no doubt about it. But stop distracting me with the delicious goodness of raised dough. Talk to me about invisible wealth. How do I look around me and see what I might be missing? I mean, what about, how do I get the invisible goggles that lets me see invisible things? What are we doing?
Well, when you go to measure net worth, we know how to do it. You're going to look at your accounts. You're going to look at yearly income statements. You determine wealth by a lot of different means. But this particular measure of wealth is invisible and can go unnoticed. And I'm talking about freedom. I'm not talking about the freedom that you're born with and that is enshrined in the Constitution. That's wonderful. That's great. That goes at the top of the asset class when you're in America. But I'm talking about a freedom that's known as time freedom. Choosing what you'll do today, having the freedom to choose what you'll do tomorrow, when you'll do it, and with whom you'll be surrounded by when you're doing it. This is something you can't really spend enough. I mean, the more you spend of your time freedom, the more you get. It's sort of an inverse equation, and it works out to where you'll end up with more life at the end of your years than if you had ignored this invisible wealth. You can spend what amounts to years in traffic commuting in the big city, or you might earn a little less, maybe for a while in a rural area, but gain back time freedom. And that is a facet of the diamond of life that you cannot really measure until you're living it. Until you have freedom of time and you take control of your time freedom in your life rather than it pushing you and controlling you, you quite maybe don't understand what it's worth, until you've got it. And then you cannot spend enough of it. And the more you spend of it, the more you accumulate. Again, it's an inverse equation. But once you've experienced it, once you're awake, you can't go back to sleep again, to quote John Popper.
It's kind of the intangibles, right? The intangible of, well, I'm making good money. And I mean, I face this where I have to drive into Anchorage frequently. And I realize, that's 2 hours of my life every day that I'm not getting back. I mean, I love the window time. Don't get me wrong, but I'm trading it. I could have lived in Anchorage and spent 30% more on my housing and everything else. But where's the balance, right? Where are you finding that freedom? Those are the choices that you make.
Yeah. Freedom to choose. And you did make a choice. So you do enjoy that. That's your freedom. And I'm not critiquing that 2 hour drive. I'm suggesting if you're letting the clock push you and or life or your corporate golden handcuffs, as they say, whatever it is, there is another form of wealth that isn't on your balance statement. The IRS isn't privy to it. It's measurable by your heart. You know it when you've got it. And those that have it look a little younger, longer, have a little more spry in their step. And the years that you do get on this planet are more tangible, more valuable, more of your own choosing. So it's time freedom is something that, again, once you're aware of it, it's an untaxed wealth that you'll never not appreciate, to do a double negative. You will appreciate it for the rest of your days once you enjoy time freedom. And again, if you're listening to this and going, yeah, but that sounds great, but I've got a job, I can't leave. You could do something. You could choose to invest more time on something on the side that could become your main gig and give you time freedom. So you'll lose a little bit more time today because you're choosing to do this side hustle, which could take over or change and alter the rest of your life and give you back time freedom later. So it is a trade, it's an equation, it's a balance, but it's worth it. And it's worth talking about and thinking about for yourself and going, where do I enjoy time freedom? And could I add more to my balance sheet of my life?
Right. So how do we, I mean, you were just saying once you're awake, you can't go back to sleep. How do we wake up to this? How do we look around and discover these things, Chris? I mean, it sounds like you've been there, you've done that, you've got the t-shirt. Tell us how to do it.
Tiffany won't let me print t-shirts anymore, so I don't really have the t-shirts.
Well, after that incident with the one where it was like you put the frack in there instead of something. I mean, there's a reason why.
I think I'm good at it, and I'm not. They usually don't fit. They're usually ill-designed. Same thing with my cat. So she's cut me off. But I've got the T-shirt that does say "Time Freedom," and we made a choice, a long time ago, about 30 years ago, to buy back our life in that way. And there were some years of privation in the interim, but I've never once regretted having the time freedom that I've gotten. I think the way to do it is similar to when you start a diet or you start a health journey. A lot of times people will tell you to create a food log and keep track of everything you eat. And when you do that, before you go to put something in your mouth, you go, wait a minute, oh, I'm going to have to log that. And if you're honest with yourself and this is just your journal. So if you cheat, you're only cheating yourself. And you think twice about it a little bit before you invest in that thing, whatever it is. And same thing with time. If you track your time, give yourself a month, get a journal, track your time for a month, and just without judgment, without any pretense, just track it. See where you're investing your time. And that really is an investment. They say, it doesn't matter whether you're talking about the elite 1% you were talking about earlier or the bottom, the most impoverished. Everybody gets 24 hours in a day. You get to invest those hours as you see fit. Even if you're in a corporate environment, you're in some sort of a job or situation in life that you don't think you've got choice in your time, start tracking it, start investing it where you wish and how you wish to, and then expanding that choice. Like saying, Zig Ziglar used to talk about, well, people tell me, oh, they don't have time to read a book, and yet they're watching 3 to 4 hours, 6 hours of television a day. Yes, you do have time. Where do you invest it? And once you start choosing and tracking and really acknowledging this concept of time freedom, you're going to start making more investments, and that bank account will grow to a point where you could never go back to sleep again.
So you're talking about, again, you're talking about delayed dividends. You're talking about paying it now into things like you said, privation, depriving yourself of maybe some free time now and investing it in something that in the future may pay dividends. How do we decide what those things are, though? I mean, maybe it's easy for you. You saw a clear path. Maybe somebody else out there is like, I don't have a side hustle, or I don't have something that, I mean, how do you decide what it is that you should be focusing that free time that you want to give up now for more time later?
But you say clear path, but it's actually quite circuitous to get to where I am today in my thinking about this time freedom and the freedom of my own time and the freedom to choose. But it's like Jack Canfield said in his book Success Principles. He goes, you can cross America at night in a vehicle with your headlights only seeing 200 yards at a time. So you needn't see the destination to know where you're going. You don't have to see the end of the journey. You don't have to, as long as you set a destination and say, look, time freedom, capturing more of that invisible wealth is my ultimate goal. You don't have to be able to see the through line between here and there. As long as you recognize there is a route, there is a journey, invest your time, be aware that it's an investment, be aware that it can pay dividends today and tomorrow. It can be as slow as you want or as fast as you want. You can apply the Parkinson's law and say, you know what, I'm not going to give myself 20 years to capture this time, because that will, then the scope of work will expand to fill that time. Say, I'm going to do it in a year. And within 12 months, I'll be in charge of my time. Or you could cut that in half and go 6 months. I'll have twice the time freedom in 6 months than I have today. I don't know how, but I'm going to find a way, and you will.
Because what the mind of man can conceive and believe, it can achieve, right? I mean, once you put that and enter that into your computer, your mind, your subconscious, it will find ways. You'll find things that kind of pop up, and you're like, oh, I never thought about it from that perspective before, because now your mind is constantly crunching on it in the background, trying to figure out a way to make it happen, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And when you tally up the assets of your balance sheet of life, in the end, I promise you, this column is going to mean the most to you. Time freedom is a profit column if you recognize it, and it will be the most valuable asset you look back on with great amount of joy.
Is there any other kind of reading we can do to help with this idea of time freedom, Chris? Any books or things we can read on this?
Oh, I think you just quoted Napoleon Hill. I think Think and Grow Rich is an excellent book to read. I would selfishly also recommend my new book, The Millionaire Maker, but also one by Dr. David Schwartz. I think will change your life. It's called The Magic of Thinking Big.
The Magic of Thinking Big is an amazing book, and you're right, a good one. As a Man Thinketh by James Allen, also another good one that helps you control those thoughts. Chris Story, the man from Homer, thank you, my friend. I appreciate you coming on board as always. It was the capper to today. I appreciate that. Thank you. All right.
Well, my pleasure.
Folks, we got to go. The Michael Duke Show. Tomorrow, Mike Shower and more. Common sense, liberty-based, free thinking radio. Okay, boys and girls, squirrels and nuts, fruits of all ages, thank you for coming on board and joining us today, riding this crazy train to where we've been going. It is a crazy train, isn't it? I mean, again, the bridge is out. We can see it. If we can only grab the handle and pull on the brakes hard enough. All right. Well, that's it. Thank you, my friends. We will see you tomorrow. Have a great day.
We've shed our terrestrial radio skin, and now we are slimy lizard internet people. It's the Michael Dukes Show.